Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be my monthly reading wrap up. Now for the month of February, I was able to complete a total of 7 books, which is not bad, a bit lower than what I was hoping, but given a few curveballs that were thrown my way this month that really impacted some of my free time reading ability, I'm really not upset with my 7 completed books. I'm also happy to say I read a lot of incredible new releases that I'm so excited to be chatting more about today, so without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. The first book I was able to complete for the month of February was Ancillary Sword by Ann Leckie. This is book 2 to the Imperial Raditch trilogy, and so far I have loved every single installment, and I definitely plan to wrap up the trilogy as soon as possible because I have just been loving reading Breck's story so far. But this is a space opera series centering our main character Breck, and before the start of this novel, Breck was once known as the Justice of Torin, basically existing as a spaceship AI for like thousands of years, and they also existed through individuals called ancillaries, which are like 20 physical bodies that are all connected via the same consciousness. So Breck, for thousands of years, basically existed within a reality of collective consciousness. But at the beginning of book 1, we find Breck in a very isolated, snowy landscape. They're also now a singular individual. We're not quite sure why they're there, but we quickly learn that they're seeking out revenge for some reason. From there, we basically learn more about Breck's past. We have a parallel storyline to read about what happened to Breck to get her to this point, as well as a present day storyline of her trying to enact her revenge. All throughout book 1, it was absolutely captivating, and you basically have a huge reveal on like this larger intergalactic conspiracy, as there is this very large empire existing within this series with an all-powerful emperor that has been alive for like thousands of years, and there's just a lot of different things happening. But a main aspect of this empire is that they're very colonial minded, and they're constantly taking over and destroying other planets and kind of using their military might to be able to accomplish this. Going into book 2, I had incredibly high expectations because transparently, I loved Breck, and I also loved the sort of collecting of unlikely comrades that she sort of accomplished throughout the first book. And there's also a lot of interesting dialogue around language and culture, gender and identity as well. Book 2 basically kicks off right at the end of book 1, and it was absolutely breakneck. It also introduces us to some new and unexpected characters that we follow and fall in love with as well. Book 2 really kind of established Breck in creating their sort of team to sort of accomplish their goals. They're also traveling to a new planet and having to basically unravel a new conspiracy there. This book balances sort of micro and macro level politics in this sci-fi world so well. We really get entrenched in a new planet's like politics and issues and all of these things, and we follow Breck as they work to sort of tease out and confront the corruption that exists on this sort of singular planetary level. But we also understand that this singular planet and this singular issue has like larger scale implications as well. Again, I really enjoyed book 2. It had such great character moments. I fell in love with Breck even more. I love following new characters. The conspiracy and the sci-fi plot was truly incredible. I could not guess what was going on. I was flipping the pages. I can't wait to check out book 3 within this trilogy. I feel like it's going to blow my mind. And I just feel like Ann Leckie really walks the balance between compelling characters, really interesting, like introspective moments with our characters, while also having a very fast-paced plot that will be full of conspiracy, twists and turns, corruption, like large government issues, that whole thing. It just creates for such an unputdownable book. And I would give Ancillary Sword like a 4.25 out of 5 stars. I still think I like Ancillary Justice more, but this follow-up novel was also excellent. Next book I picked up was Long Shadow by Olivia Atwater. I was feeling a little bit slumpy, so I wanted to pick up something that was like easy breezy, something I knew I would read very, very quickly. And the Regency Fairy Tale series is a series that I just honestly adore so much. It's the perfect combination of like historical fiction romance with just a dash of fantasy and fae. It creates such fun scenarios. It also has that classic romance setup where you're following like new main characters within each installment, but you still have character crossover and things are very much connected in a very fun and endearing way. You sort of get the picture. This book, we're following following our main character Abigail, and Abigail is the adopted daughter of two other characters we've already run into, and Abigail is basically throwing herself headfirst within this investigation to help her father, who is the Lord Sorcerer in this world. And basically what's occurring is that young marriageable women in London are tragically like dying and disappearing. Our main character Abigail wants to figure out what in the world is going on. Abigail also has the unusual ability of being able to see and commune with ghosts. Within her investigation, she runs into an unlikely figure, and that is Mercy, who also can see and communicate with ghosts and is also kind of a street rat magician-like character, sort of a swindler character, and they begin working alongside each other and a romance begins to bloom from there. This book is by no means a book that's going to blow your mind, but if you're looking for like a sweet, endearing romance that also has a bit of a mystery alongside it, a book that you will read quickly, also having kind of lower stakes in terms of like the plot elements of this book, I was pretty delighted by this. It kind of checked all the boxes I was looking for, and I would give this book like a 3.5 out of 5 stars. The next book I picked up was Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adeje-Brenya, and oh my gosh, this book was excellent, by far and away one of the best books I've read so far this year. I know it's only February, but I feel like that feeling is going to persist through the rest of the year as well. But this is a literary fiction dystopian-esque book that is absolutely brutal and definitely has a lot of different trigger warnings, but the writing style, the concept, and just how the author put all of these different components together in this book just worked so successfully for me, and I was both riveted, unable to put down, and also horrified every single second. But this book is set in kind of a near future American setting, and it's basically set in a world where the prison system has evolved in such a way where in which individuals can sign up to participate in this gladiator-like competition, and if they survive for long enough, they basically can win their freedom. This book is obviously very much inspired by the real systemic issues that we have in our current prison system in America, and in fact that while this is a near future setting, the author is constantly calling upon via references and footnotes to laws that exist to this day, and also kind of situations from the past to show how this sort of gladiator-like situation, which seems far-fetched, is in fact not far-fetched at all. Primary main character of this book is Loretta, who is kind of one of the biggest names within the Chain Gang All-Star gladiator competition, and she's very much on the cusp of being able to win her freedom. But again, while we are intimately following this main character and allowing us to see a lot of the behind the scenes, if you will, of the reality of participating in this competition, the author doesn't stop there in terms of telling the story. We're also reading from fans to people who are fighting for the rights of these gladiators, to boardroom executives who are profiting immensely off of this competition, to anchors and news individuals who are covering this sporting event, to scientists, to just so many different people who are very much involved directly or indirectly in this horrifying experience. The author also ties directly into the sporting culture in America, and there's just so many different things to read, dissect, to take away from in reading this book. It is very fast-paced, it is very violent, but I just feel like the author was completely unflinching in the story that he was trying to create, and also kind of makes the audience, the reader, feel complicit in the participation of watching this violence unfold. This book, in my opinion, was honestly incredible. Again, one of the best books I've read so far this year. I would highly recommend picking this book up. I would give this book 5 out of 5 stars. Definitely would read other books by this author as well. Very dark, but again, like, so unbelievably good. Next up, I had a slew of highly anticipated releases by some of my favorite fantasy authors, and they all came out within like a week of each other, so I was very busy this month. The first book is The Trials of Empire by Richard Swan. This is the third and final book to the Empire of Wolf series, one of my all-time favorite fantasy series, and I'm happy to report that I personally feel like Richard Swan stuck the landing. I enjoyed this series immensely, but I feel like the star and the reason why this series works so well is the characterization and the dialogue and the introspection the characters have within this book, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So the Empire of the Wolf series is set in a fantasy landscape where an emperor sort of rules the day, and how the emperor sort of maintains his laws is that he has individuals called justices roam the land, and they're magical and very powerful individuals, and they basically can act as judge and executioner for various crimes. Follow one of the most powerful justices. His name is Sir Conrad von Vault, but this book is not written from his point of view, but instead his female apprentice who's traveling with him during this time. At the beginning of book 1, they're basically investigating a crime of aristocratic corruption, but the series very quickly escalates into like large political conspiracy that has the entire stakes of the empire on the line. This book also is written reflectively. Our main character and narrator is writing this from the future. So she's both like having us experience things in present day, like the immediacy of the emotions, the intensity of what's going on, but she also colors those experiences with introspection and reflection of someone who is older or sitting with these emotions with more time to add additional context to everything as well. And that combination of things, the narration of this book, is just so unbelievably good. The series itself is just truly wild. Book 1, I love. Book 2, I was obsessed with, and I'm happy to report book 3 completely took over my life while I was reading it. This series honestly is borderline like horror. In fact, it's kind of like medieval religious horror. The villains, the escalation of the magic, and the lengths that people will go, both good and bad, to try to get what they want was just horrifying to read on so many different levels. This series, I feel like, does such a great job escalating the plot. Like every plot twist that you read within this series and will completely catch you by surprise, but like over the course of the series, the author is constantly raising the stakes, so nothing feels flat or bland. But I have to say, my favorite aspect of the series, outside of the very well written like medieval horror elements, is I just loved the characters so much, and they're very fascinating relationships with one another. Because justices and apprentices to justices are law keepers, they're kind of like philosopher, lawyers, and warriors all wrapped up into one. And a large part of this book is the characters like looking into their own moral compass and kind of being incredibly reflective on what is morally right and what is morally wrong, and having immense disagreements about their approach to saving the empire, saving the world from evil. Does stopping evil by participating in evil make you evil? Like a lot of those conversations are happening within this book. So it sort of has this sort of philosophical lean to it that I really appreciated so much. I also just really appreciate that Richard Swan is not afraid from making our hero characters very complicated and is not trying to run away from their flaws. Instead, kind of showing how good people put under immense stress can make bad decisions, and that is also like part of their character as well. All that to say is I really appreciated this concluding third novel within this fantasy series. The characters, the direction of how everything went, I just really appreciated it, and I felt like it stayed really true to the style and vibe of the first 2 books. I can earnestly say I had no idea where this was going, and I just enjoyed all of the different elements that Richard Swan included. He's definitely now a must-read author for me. I will be buying all of his books in the future. This trilogy, amazing. The next book I picked up was The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. I love Robert Jackson Bennett so much. This is my 7th book of his that I've had the opportunity to pick up, and I'm happy to report I was not disappointed by this book at all. This is like a super weird sci-fi meets fantasy, Sherlock Holmes-esque detective story, and it had such delightful characters in such a weird world, and just all of the inputs again just worked quite well for me. This book is set in a fantasy sci-fi world where basically cities are surrounded by these gigantic walls because on one side of the empire there's this giant sea, and these monsters come out of the sea, try to destroy these sea walls, and basically like attack the human populace that live here. I would kind of akin it to like Attack on Titan meets Godzilla. In this world, because these like giant monsters exist, there have been advancements in like science and technology, but it's all very like natural leaning. It's not so like steampunky, but more like let's use this mold to advance our bodies in an unexpected fashion. So it has this sort of naturalist, organic lean to it, which is also very weird and strange. In this book, we're introduced to our main character, Din, and Din is an engraver. Basically, his body has been altered in such a way in which he has a photographic memory, which makes him, of course, a fantastic assistant to an investigator because they're able to look upon a crime scene and remember all the details, remember a conversation word for word, all of these types of things. Din works for a very kind of notorious detective named Anna, and he's not quite sure he's going to make it that long because Anna is strange and demanding and just weird, to say the least. But he also quickly realizes that Anna is actually incredibly talented. At the beginning of this book, they're called to a crime scene in which a very powerful engineer is found dead in a very unusual fashion because an entire tree has erupted from his body and people do not understand how this is possible. So of course, Anna's on the case and she's bringing Din along for the ride, and everything very much quickly escalates into political conspiracy. Everything is bigger than what it seems, and it was truly such a page turner. First and foremost, Anna and Din as our main characters, fantastic. The perfect, bizarre pair that like slowly begin to get along and understand each other. It's very like Sherlock and Watson core, like, because we the reader and Din are constantly bewildered by Anna, our main character, but just the strangeness and the camaraderie that began to exist between these two sets of characters is also so good. There's also a lot of mysteries at play. Obviously, there's this political conspiracy, but we also have mysteries surrounding our main characters and trying to unpack their past and what in the world is going on. The world itself was also so weird that I love just sort of piecing together the world building elements of this as well. Just there were so many fun things to encounter in this, with also like a very compelling detective mystery at the core. I feel like I could read 100 books centering these two main characters as they take on various cases around this empire. He has just such a way with like dialogue and characters where he can create like a scary, harrowing situation but inject unexpected humor where you will be like laughing out loud to something that someone said and also on the next page be absolutely terrified. It's such a great balance that Robert Jackson Bennett's able to strike. And I really liked this book through and through, would highly recommend it. I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The last anticipated release I was able to complete this month was The Warm Hands of Ghosts by Catherine Arden. Catherine Arden wrote the Bear and the Nightingale series, which is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. I feel like Catherine Arden has such a skill with combining real historical events, humanizing them, and also adding a dash of magic that works so seamlessly with the historical reality of the time period in which she's writing in. She also has such a compelling writing style that's beautiful and will just absolutely draw you in. This story is a World War I tale, and we're reading from our two main characters, Laura and Freddie, who are siblings. Our main character, I would say, is Laura, and Laura has been a nurse on the front lines of World War I for many years until the day she's actually injured and sent back home to Canada to basically become a civilian once again. However, though, an event happened in Halifax where she lived, which turned her life upside down once again, and she also receives a mysterious package from the front, seemingly from her brother, with no real explanation to what is going on. She also begins to hear sort of strange stories from the front lines that kind of hint to ghosts or some type of haunting. She decides to travel back to the war to try to figure out what in the world happened to her brother Freddie. Alongside her chapters, we also get Freddie's chapters and kind of what happened to him and where he is currently at. This book, one, is really beautifully written. It's written in a very sharp and kind of staccato fashion, not in the sort of long lyrical way that maybe we have read in the past from this author, but I feel like it works so well. It creates this sort of uncertainty while reading this book of exactly what is going on, exactly what is it that our characters are feeling. But again, I think for the style, the time period, and just like the emotional reality of these characters, it really worked quite well. This book definitely uses, I think, fantasy in a very successful way. It's leaning on lore not only from the locations in which the battles are taking place in, but also created amongst soldiers as a way to cope with the terrifying reality of being a soldier during this time period, sort of bringing to life the superstition of not only soldiers but also families just seeking for some type of solace or information regarding their loved ones. I will say this book is a very dark and heavy read and is very much centering pain, PTSD, the desire for second chances, self-loathing that would very much result from the traumatic experience of World War I. But it's also a beautiful story of like family and connection and love, despite the darkness that's surrounding all of these characters. I really enjoyed this book. I was honestly drawn in by the writing style and the characters and just like rooting for everyone for this second chance. And yeah, I love Catherine Arden's writing so much, and I feel like this was very successful in terms of what she was trying to accomplish, and I would give this book like a 4 out of 5 stars. The last book I completed for the month of February was The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is book 2 to this sort of fun, quirky, fairy tale leaning YA fantasy series. This series is truly like everything I love about YA. It's fun, charming, and quirky. It has sort of a romantic lean to it. It has a coming of age elements to it. It's just so cheesy cheeky, and it has like fast moving plot elements, but again, it kind of has a lower stakes element to it where I just feel so invested and charmed by everything that's happening within it. But in this book, we're following our main character, Evangeline. At the beginning of book 1, she has her heart broken. So she decides to turn to the Prince of Broken Hearts, who's kind of a god in this world, the god of broken hearts, and strikes a deal with him to save her heart. And in exchange for his help, she basically gives our other main character, Jax, 3 kisses of his choosing. And from there, she's basically wrapped up in a lot of different unexpected political things, as well as a prophecy and a faraway kingdom. She's also participating in a competition to marry a prince. It's just a lot of different things are happening, and a lot of different gods and supernatural creatures are also involved. Book 1 was a blast. I loved Evangeline. She's naive, but also a character to root for, and seeing her sort of come into herself and her own power was really delightful. Book 2 takes place exactly where the first book ended, and I honestly think I liked it even more than book 1. Her relationship with Jax is just delightful. I love their back and forth. Jax very much gives like Hal from Hal's Moving Castle vibes. I also appreciate that she has a healthy suspicion of this main character, because while he's very charming and witty and handsome, she's also like still a little suspicious of him because 1, he's an immortal god with his own agenda, and 2, she doesn't like the feeling of being played without all the information. New twists and turns are thrown into this plot, but the overall feeling of like a fairy tale brought to life within this book continues to persist. I loved that part of it. I loved the folklore sort of influence and inspiration of this. I just really love following Evangeline. I love seeing her take on various obstacles, and I want to read the 3rd book very, very soon. I loved this. Like, for what it's trying to do, I feel like Stephanie Garber was incredibly successful, and I would give this like a really high rating, like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. For like a fun YA romance leaning fantasy adventure, give me more. You know what I mean? Alrighty guys, those are all the books I was able to read recently. Please let me know below some books you've read recently, as I would love to know, and I will see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!